My phone slipped from my hand and hit the floor. On the screen, a picture I'll never forget. My daughter, Rachel Parker, standing in a wedding gown, smiling next to a man I barely knew. "Rachel, did you get married?" "Yeah, Mama, yesterday." I froze. No invitation, no call, not even a message. Just a photo on Facebook with the caption, "Family complete." But I wasn't in it. That was the moment I realized, sometimes the people you'd give your life for can erase you from theirs in a single click. My cell phone slipped from my trembling hand and hit the floor with a dull thud. The screen stayed lit, a frozen, glowing window into a world that no longer had space for me. It was my daughter, Rachel Parker, standing in a white wedding gown. Her smile was radiant, flawless, the kind of happiness a mother dreams of seeing on her child's face. But the man standing next to her, tall, elegant, confident, I barely knew him, and the caption below the photo read, "Family complete." Those two words hit harder than the fall of that phone. Family complete. Without me. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. It felt as if someone had reached into my chest and ripped something vital out. I blinked, hoping it was a dream, a misunderstanding, maybe an old photo from a fashion shoot, anything but what it truly was. But then my phone vibrated again, a message from a mutual friend. "Congratulations to your daughter. She looked beautiful, Evelyn." That was the confirmation. Rachel, my only child, the reason I had lived and sacrificed every breath for 67 years, had gotten married the day before, and I hadn't even known. "Rachel," I whispered, my voice cracking as I hit the call button. She answered on the third ring, her voice casual, distracted, surrounded by the distant sounds of traffic. "Hey, Mama. Rachel, did you get married?" There was a pause, the kind that stretches forever in a mother's heart. Then, with a light chuckle that cut like glass, she said, "Yeah, Mama, yesterday. It was just a small thing. Only family. Only family." That phrase echoed inside my skull like a hammer striking steel. I wanted to ask how she could say only family when I wasn't there, but my throat closed up before the words could escape. When the call ended, I stared at that picture again. Her joy looked perfect, her dress, delicate lace with pearls. Behind her stood Daniel Carter, her new husband, and his parents, Richard and Margaret Carter, smiling proudly. Everything looked elegant, coordinated, like a magazine photo. Everyone there belonged, except me. I deleted the image, but the imprint stayed burned into my mind. The silence that followed was unbearable, stretching through the kitchen like smoke. And in that silence, one question formed, sharp, simple, unrelenting. What does a mother do when she stops being family? My name is Evelyn Grace Parker, and for 67 years, I believed that family was everything. I raised Rachel alone after my husband Thomas Parker passed away. He was a quiet man, a school bus driver who died too soon, leaving me with a little girl and a mountain of bills. From that day forward, every choice I made, every job I took, every prayer I whispered, was for her. I cleaned houses across Atlanta for two different families, the Lawsons and the Whitakers, so I could afford her school tuition. I mopped marble floors in Buckhead mansions by day and hemmed dresses in our small apartment by night. When my hands cracked from bleach and cold water, I would wrap them in old socks and keep sewing. Because Rachel had dreams, and I was determined to make them real. She was bright, beautiful, curious. At 5 years old, she got pneumonia, and I spent 15 sleepless nights caring for her, cleaning offices during the day and watching her breathe through the night. I still remember the moment she finally smiled again, her cheeks flushed with color. "Mama," she whispered, "when I get married, you'll be the prettiest maid of honor ever." Those words lived in my heart for more than 20 years. The years flew by, like pages in a book. When Rachel turned 16, I sold my engagement ring to throw her the sweet 16 party she had always dreamed of. I rented a small banquet hall in Midtown, cooked trays of macaroni and cheese, fried chicken, collard greens, and baked the red velvet cake myself. That night, she hugged me tight and said, "You're the best mother in the world." I believed her. I believed every word. I thought our bond was unbreakable. But somewhere between college applications and graduation photos, something shifted. Something small at first, like a loose thread you barely notice until the fabric starts to tear. When she got accepted into a prestigious business school, I took an extra cleaning job. I wanted her to study without worrying about money. But when she came home on weekends, her stories were filled with names I didn't know and places I couldn't picture. Cafes, internships, people who spoke about markets and branding. She stopped sharing little things, the jokes, the gossip, the random thoughts she used to tell me at dinner. Then came Daniel Carter. The first time she said his name, her whole face lit up. "He's brilliant, Mama. He's from a really good family. You'll love him." When I met him, I cooked my best. Baked mac and cheese, honey-glazed ham, sweet tea. He was polite, but his eyes scanned our small apartment like a real estate agent evaluating property. "Nice place, Mrs. Parker," he said with a tight smile. I thanked him, but inside, I knew what he meant. That night, Rachel told me I had been too intense, asking him too many questions. "Mama, not everyone's like us, okay? You can't just talk about everything so openly." It was the first time I felt ashamed of who I was. The first time my daughter made me feel like a burden instead of a blessing. From there, the distance grew. Our Sunday dinners became phone calls. The calls became texts, and eventually, even those stopped. When she graduated, I cried through the entire ceremony. Seeing her in that cap and gown felt like witnessing the proof that every blister, every sleepless night, every sacrifice had been worth it. Afterward, she invited me to dinner with the Carters, her boyfriend's parents. It was the first time I met Richard and Margaret formally. They talked about Italy, fine wines, and art exhibitions in New York. I talked about Atlanta's summer heat and my favorite soul food spot in Decatur. The silence that followed told me I didn't belong at that table. That night, Rachel said something I'll never forget. "Mama, you have to be careful what you say sometimes. People might misinterpret." "Misinterpret?" I asked. "They're refined, Mama. You wouldn't understand." Refined. That word stung more than any insult, because it meant that love, sacrifice, and loyalty were no longer enough. Not in the world she wanted to belong to. Months later, she told me she and Daniel were thinking about getting married. My heart leapt. "That's wonderful, baby. When's the date? I'll help with everything." But her eyes darted away. "Nothing big, Mama. Just something small." I nodded, hiding my disappointment. After all, it was her wedding, her happiness. But deep down, something whispered that I was already being written out of the story. Then came that morning, the morning everything changed. Tuesday. I was having coffee and a pecan Danish scrolling through Facebook when I saw it. Rachel in her wedding dress, Daniel beside her, the Carters smiling like royalty. The caption read, "Finally married. Thank you to our families for making this day perfect." Families. Plural. But I wasn't in any of them. I didn't cry right away. I just stared, until the coffee went cold and the sun moved across the kitchen floor. And then, without warning, the tears came. Not the loud kind, but the silent ones that feel like they're draining the soul out of you. In that moment, I understood something I had never allowed myself to believe. To my daughter, I was no longer family. I was an old chapter, one she had quietly torn from the book of her life. That night, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling fan turning slow circles above me, I felt something inside me crack. But beneath the grief, beneath the humiliation, a small spark of something new began to burn. It wasn't anger. Not yet. It was clarity. For 67 years, I had lived my life for others, for my husband, for my daughter, for the families whose floors I scrubbed clean. But now, for the first time, I asked myself, who was I when no one needed me? And in that silence before dawn, as the church bells of St. Mary's rang faintly in the distance, Evelyn Grace Parker made the first truly independent decision of her entire life. If I was no longer part of Rachel's family, then Rachel would no longer be the center of mine. The morning after that photo shattered my world. I woke up before sunrise. For a moment, I forgot. I reached for my phone out of habit, expecting a good morning text from Rachel like she used to send when she was in college. But the screen was empty, cold, and silent. The same photo still burned in my mind. Her smile, that dress, the way she leaned into Daniel as if she had never belonged anywhere else. I sat at my small kitchen table, wrapped in my old robe, the one Thomas bought me our last Christmas together. The coffee pot gurgled in the background. It was the only sound in the house, that and the faint hum of the refrigerator. For years, this kitchen had been the center of our little world. Birthday breakfasts, college acceptance celebrations, late-night talks when life went wrong. But that morning, it felt like a museum, filled with memories of a life that no longer existed. I stared at the half-empty cup in front of me and whispered, "What now, Evelyn?" For decades, I had answered every question with Rachel's name. Now, for the first time in my life, I had to answer with my own. That day drifted by in a fog. I cleaned the house. Not because it needed cleaning, but because I didn't know what else to do. I scrubbed the counter until my hands ached, rearranged the spice rack twice, folded the same set of towels 3 times. Each chore felt like a way to delay the inevitable. The truth that my daughter had chosen a life where I didn't exist. At sunset, I sat on the porch, watching the neighborhood kids ride their bikes down the street. Their laughter echoed through the warm Atlanta air, blending with the distant rumble of traffic from Peachtree Road. I used to imagine Rachel's children playing there someday, my grandkids. Now I wasn't sure if I'd ever even meet them. That night, I didn't cry. I just lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slow circles, thinking of all the times I'd put my dreams on hold for someone else. And by dawn, something inside me had shifted. It was as if I'd been asleep for years and was finally opening my eyes. The next morning, I pulled out an old spiral notebook from the kitchen drawer. It was the one I used to track Rachel's doctor appointments, tuition deadlines, grocery budgets. The pages were yellowed, curled at the edges, but still sturdy, just like me. On the first blank page in shaky handwriting, I wrote, "Plan for Independence, August 12, 2024. I underlined it twice, and for the first time in years, I felt something powerful: purpose. 1. Assess resources. I wasn't rich, but I wasn't helpless either. I had worked my whole life, and though most of it had gone into bills and Rachel's education, I had always saved a little extra, just in case. When you grow up poor, you learn to keep a rainy day fund for storms that no one else can see. I opened the metal tin hidden behind the flour container, my emergency cash. Then I opened the small wooden box under my bed, where I kept the savings passbook from First Georgia Bank. The numbers weren't huge, but they were solid. And then I remembered something Rachel didn't even know existed: the secret savings account I had opened the day she turned 18. Every dollar I earned from sewing dresses on weekends, I had deposited there. I had planned to surprise her with it on her wedding day, a gift to help her start married life debt-free. 10 years of saving, 10 years of hope. Now that account would serve a new purpose. My ticket to freedom. 2. Secure stability. I needed to take control of my finances properly. No more hiding money in tins and envelopes. So that Monday, I dressed in my best navy blue dress, the one I used for church, and took the early bus downtown to the bank. The young teller greeted me with the polite smile people reserve for old ladies. But when I asked to speak with Mr. Samuel Brooks, the financial advisor who'd helped me years ago, her smile changed. Within minutes, he appeared. The same calm man with gray hair and kind eyes. "Mrs. Parker," he said warmly, shaking my hand. "It's been a while." "Yes, it has," I replied, forcing a smile. "I'd like to review all my accounts and make a few changes." For the next hour, he went through every detail with me: savings, certificates of deposit, interest rates, options for investments. I listened carefully, taking notes like a student. For once, I wasn't managing money for someone else. I was building a future for me. When we were done, he looked up and said, "You've done well, Mrs. Parker. You've built a solid foundation." Those words hit me harder than I expected. No one had ever told me that before. For decades, I had been seen as the cleaner, the helper, Rachel's mother. But in that moment, I felt seen, as Evelyn, a woman who had built something from nothing. 3. Legal clarity. 2 days later, I visited Mr. Andrew Cole, the attorney who had handled my husband's estate years ago. He looked surprised to see me. "Mrs. Parker, what brings you in today?" "I need to update my will," I said calmly, "and I want to make sure everything I own is properly organized." He nodded, motioning me to sit. For 40 minutes, we reviewed every document: the deed to my house, insurance policies, savings accounts. When he asked about beneficiaries, I hesitated. "I want half of my estate to go to a charity that helps single mothers," I said finally. and the other half to my daughter, but under one condition." "What kind of condition?" he asked. "She can only claim it after writing a letter explaining her choices. Why she left me out. Why she thought I didn't belong." He blinked, processing the weight of that. "She doesn't have to apologize," I added softly. "I just want honesty, that's all." Mr. Cole smiled faintly. "That's poetic, Mrs. Parker. Fair, but powerful." I signed the documents with steady hands. When I left his office, I felt 10 pounds lighter. 4. Choose a new home. That evening, while sitting on my porch, Mrs. Brenda Lewis, my next-door neighbor, came over with her usual lemon pie. She was one of those women who knew everything happening in the neighborhood, but her heart was kind. She had been worried about me since hearing the news. "Evelyn, you've done more than enough for that girl," she said, shaking her head. "You deserve a life that's yours." She mentioned her sister Gloria, who had moved to a senior living community in Decatur called Magnolia Grove Residence. "It's lovely," she said. "They have activities, security, your own apartment. Gloria says it's the happiest she's been in years." At first I laughed. "That's for people who don't have families, Brenda." She gave me a look that pierced right through my denial. "And what do you call what you've got now?" Her words stayed with me long after she left. Maybe those places weren't for people without family. Maybe they were for people brave enough to start over. 2 days later, I took the bus to Decatur. The Magnolia Grove residence sat at the edge of a quiet park. Red brick buildings surrounded by tall oak trees, flowers in bloom, and benches where residents chatted under the morning sun. The receptionist, Monica Jenkins, greeted me with a warmth that felt genuine, not rehearsed. "Would you like a tour, Mrs. Parker?" she asked. "I would," I replied. She showed me the dining area, the community garden, the chapel, the library filled with sunlight. Then she led me into one of the available apartments. A cozy one-bedroom unit with a small kitchenette and a balcony overlooking the garden. The air smelled faintly of lavender and clean linen. I stood by the window, looking out at the residents laughing below. They weren't waiting for phone calls that never came. They weren't invisible. They were living. "I'll take it," I said, surprising even myself. Monica smiled. "Excellent choice. That one's my favorite. You can move in within 2 weeks." 5. Letting go. Back home, I started sorting through decades of memories. The hardest room was Rachel's, untouched since the day she moved out. Her old trophies, college essays, prom dress, all neatly stored as if she might return at any moment. But she never did. I folded her clothes, packed the boxes carefully, and labeled them for Rachel, if she ever wants them. Then I placed the boxes in a small storage unit downtown. It felt like closing a chapter, gently but firmly. As I cleaned the rest of the house, I found pieces of myself I had forgotten. An old sketchbook from my 20s, a cookbook my mother gave me, photos of Thomas and me dancing in our tiny kitchen. I realized that somewhere along the way, I had stopped collecting memories of my own. Everything in my life had revolved around Rachel's milestones. Now, for the first time, I was making room for mine. 6. The visit. Saturday morning, as I was labeling the last box, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar, but the voice wasn't. "Mama, guess what? We're back from our honeymoon," Rachel said cheerfully, as if nothing had happened. "Daniel and I want to stop by this afternoon to show you pictures." My heart skipped. Part of me still wanted to see her, to touch her face, to believe it had all been a mistake. But another part, the one that had grown stronger these last few days, felt cold, steady. "What time?" I asked. 5. "We'll bring some gifts from Cabo." "All right," I said. "I'll be here." When I hung up, I didn't know whether to cry or laugh. She thought souvenirs could patch the hole she'd carved in my heart. I cleaned the living room, brewed sweet tea, and set out pecan Danish on the table. Habits born from years of hospitality. But this time, the air felt different. This time, I wasn't preparing for my daughter. I was preparing for closure. At exactly 5, they arrived. Rachel looked radiant, tanned from the Mexican sun, wearing a new designer dress. Daniel followed, carrying a paper bag filled with trinkets. "Mama," Rachel exclaimed, hugging me tightly. "I missed you." I hugged her back, feeling her perfume, foreign, expensive, distant. We sat down and she started talking about the honeymoon, the beaches, the food, the amazing sunsets. Daniel smiled politely but checked his watch twice. After a few minutes, I asked the question that had been burning in me. So, why didn't you tell me? She froze. Mama, it all happened so fast. We didn't want to make a big fuss. You know me, I hate big parties. That was a lie. Rachel had loved parties since she was 6. I looked at her, my daughter who used to promise I'd be her maid of honor, and saw a stranger. But instead of anger, I felt an eerie calm. All right, I said softly. I understand. She smiled, relieved, and handed me the gifts. A ceramic ashtray, a keychain, a t-shirt that said, I at Cabo. Each one felt like a polite apology that meant nothing. After they left, I sat in silence, surrounded by the smell of her perfume lingering in the air. I placed the gifts in a drawer. The same drawer where I kept things I didn't want to see again. Then I whispered to myself, no more waiting, Evelyn. No more begging for crumbs of love. 7. A new beginning. The following morning, I woke up before dawn. The air felt crisp, alive. I made coffee, black and strong, and sat at the kitchen table, the same place where so many disappointments had unfolded. But this time, it felt different. I opened my notebook again and added one final line under my plan, live for myself. I underlined it slowly, letting the ink soak deep into the paper. Then I called Monica at Magnolia Grove. Good morning, this is Mrs. Parker, I said. I'd like to move in sooner if possible. There was a brief pause, then her cheerful voice. Of course, Mrs. Parker, we'll have everything ready by Monday. Monday. A new week. A new life. I spent the next 2 days finishing the move, donating furniture, giving away dishes, selling old clothes at the flea market. Each item I let go of felt like removing a chain I hadn't realized I'd been wearing. By Sunday night, the house was almost empty. The walls echoed when I walked through the rooms, but instead of sadness, I felt peace. Peace, because emptiness meant space for something new. On Monday morning, as the moving truck pulled away, I looked back at the little house where I had raised Rachel, where I had become invisible without realizing it. The porch swing creaked softly in the wind. I whispered a silent goodbye. Thank you for everything you taught me. Thank you for helping me learn how to let go. Then I got into the car, clutching my notebook to my chest, and said the words that marked the true beginning of the rest of my life. Let's go, Evelyn. It's time to live. When the moving truck turned onto the long tree-lined road of Decatur, I pressed my hand against the window and exhaled. The sign read, Magnolia Grove Residence, a community for independent living. For the first time in 67 years, those 3 words, independent living, belonged to me. The air smelled of freshly cut grass and magnolia blossoms. The driver stopped in front of a red brick building with white shutters and balconies filled with potted plants. It was peaceful, the kind of place where the world seemed to breathe slower. As I stepped out, the morning sun touched my face. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't sad. I felt free. Monica J. Jenkins, the receptionist I'd met before, greeted me with a smile that could melt even the coldest morning. Welcome home, Mrs. Parker. Home. Such a small word, but it carried a weight I hadn't felt in years. 1. Settling in. The apartment was smaller than my old house, but it felt warmer. 1 bedroom, a cozy living room, and a little balcony that overlooked a garden full of azaleas and hummingbirds. I unpacked slowly, deliberately, only the things that mattered. A framed photo of Thomas and me from 1978, my mother's cookbook. A faded picture of Rachel at her high school graduation, the last time I remembered her hugging me with both arms. I didn't hang that photo on the wall. I placed it in a drawer. Not out of anger, but because I wanted to decorate my new life with hope, not ghosts. As I arranged the final box of dishes, I heard laughter outside my door. 3 women stood in the hallway, carrying a tray of muffins. New neighbor, one of them said cheerfully. We don't let anyone move in without a proper welcome. They introduced themselves. Mrs. Dorothy White, 74, retired elementary teacher. Mrs. Helen Foster, 68, former nurse. And Mr. Leonard Brown, 76, widower and dance instructor. Within an hour, I was drinking sweet tea with them in the common room, surrounded by conversation that didn't revolve around anyone's children or regrets. We talked about books, travel dreams, favorite desserts, and the best soul food restaurants in Atlanta. For once, I wasn't someone's mother or someone's helper. I was just Evelyn, a woman with stories, opinions, and a future. 2. The gift of ordinary days. The first week passed like a gentle breeze. Each morning, I woke before sunrise, brewed my coffee, and stepped onto my balcony to watch the garden come alive. Sparrows chirped, sprinklers hissed softly, and the smell of magnolia trees filled the air. On Wednesdays, I joined the knitting club, my first real hobby in decades. The room was filled with chatter, the rhythmic click of needles, and the laughter of women who had all loved and lost in different ways. "You've got good hands, Evelyn," said Mrs. White, watching me stitch a neat line across the edge of a scarf. "You should join the Christmas fair committee." I smiled shyly. "We'll see." It had been a long time since anyone had invited me to be part of something. On Thursdays, I attended the ballroom dancing class led by Mr. Brown. At first, I was stiff, awkward, afraid to take up space, but his voice was patient, reassuring. "No one's judging here, Evelyn," he said with a kind grin. "We dance because we can." And so I did. For the first time since Thomas died, I let music move my body without guilt. I laughed when I made mistakes, I clapped when others did well. I felt alive. Every night, I'd return to my apartment with tired feet but a full heart. I'd make a cup of tea, sit by the window and write in my notebook, small notes like, "Today, I smiled without pretending," or "Happiness feels like breathing fresh air after years underground." 3. The call. A week after I moved in, I was in the middle of folding laundry when my phone rang. The number flashed unfamiliar, but the voice froze me mid-step. "Mama, where are you?" "Rachel." I swallowed hard. "I'm fine, Rachel." Her voice came quick, panicked. "I went by the house, it's empty. The neighbors said you moved. What's going on? Why didn't you tell me?" I sat down slowly, the phone warm in my hand. "Because, baby," I said softly, "it was a decision that didn't require your approval." There was silence, the kind of silence when a child realizes the rules have changed. "What does that mean?" she asked, her tone sharpening. "It means I've started a new chapter." "Where are you? I need to see you." "I'm at Magnolia Grove residence in Decatur. It's a wonderful place for people my age." "A retirement home?" she asked, horrified. "No," I said, my voice steady. "A place where people live freely. There's a difference." Another silence, then a small, trembling question. "Are you mad at me?" I closed my eyes. For years, that question had been my weakness, the trap that always pulled me back into apologizing for wanting more. This time, I refused to step into it. "I'm not mad, Rachel. I'm just living my life. That's all." "But Mama, we were going to invite you for dinner this weekend." "That's kind of you," I interrupted gently, "but I already have plans." "Plans?" she repeated, confused. "Yes, with my new friends. We're going to Lake Lanier for the day." Her voice faltered. "You have friends?" "I do," I said simply, "and they make me laugh." When the call ended, I sat there for a long moment, staring at the phone, realizing that for the first time, Rachel had to adjust to my schedule. It was a small victory, but one that tasted like freedom. 4. Rediscovering joy. The next morning, the residents of Magnolia Grove gathered in the garden for the Saturday farmers market event. There were stalls of homemade jam, knitted scarves, wood carvings, and pies. I signed up to sell pecan Danish, using the same recipe I used to bake for Rachel when she was little. As people complimented my pastries, I felt something shift again. Pride. Not the quiet pride of survival, but the bright kind that blooms when you do something just for yourself. Mr. Brown bought 2 and winked. "Careful, Mrs. Parker, you might make us all gain weight." I laughed, a real laugh that came from deep inside, surprising even me. When the fair ended, the staff handed me an envelope with $87. It wasn't much, but it felt like gold. I had earned it for myself. That night, I wrote in my notebook, "It's strange how light life feels when you stop carrying other people's expectations." 5. The unexpected visit. One Sunday afternoon, while I was watering my balcony plants, Monica knocked on my door. "Mrs. Parker, you have visitors," she said. "A young couple, they say they're family." My chest tightened, but not with fear. I placed the watering can down and followed her to the lounge. There they were, Rachel and Daniel, sitting together on the couch. Rachel looked smaller than I remembered, her hair pulled back, eyes glossy. Daniel looked uncomfortable, his arm draped protectively over her shoulder. "Mama," Rachel whispered, standing up, Thank you for seeing us. I nodded, motioning for them to sit. So, I said calmly, how's married life treating you? Daniel cleared his throat. We just wanted to make sure you're comfortable here. I am, I replied, smiling faintly. More than I've been in a long time. Rachel glanced around. It's nice, but it must be expensive. There it was, the true reason for their visit. Fortunately, I worked hard all my life, I said, keeping my tone light. And I saved well. You don't need to worry. Daniel shifted, clearly uneasy. Rachel lowered her eyes. Mama, I never wanted to hurt you. The wedding, I held up a hand. Rachel, I don't want explanations. What's done is done. I only hope you understand something. She looked up. That love doesn't mean letting people walk over you. It means knowing when to stand tall, even alone. Her eyes filled with tears. Mama, do you still love me? I smiled sadly. I never stopped. But love doesn't erase consequences, Rachel. You chose a life without me. And now I'm learning to live mine without waiting for you. Silence filled the room, the kind that carries truth. When they left, Rachel hugged me tightly, whispering, I'm sorry. I didn't say it's okay, because it wasn't. But I patted her back gently and said, take care of yourself. 6. The Awakening. That evening, during community dinner, Mrs. Foster leaned toward me. Everything all right, Evelyn? I nodded, smiling softly. Everything is exactly how it should be. And I meant it. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't someone's shadow. I wasn't waiting by the phone. I wasn't clinging to the hope that someone else would make me feel whole. I was whole. Later, as I sat on my balcony watching the sunset paint the sky orange and gold, I whispered to the wind, thank you, God, for the lesson, for showing me that love without respect is not love at all. The magnolias swayed gently in response, and I felt an unshakable peace settle inside me, the peace of a woman who had chosen herself at last. 6 months passed like a long exhale. Each morning at Magnolia Grove, I woke up to the soft hum of life, the shuffle of slippers in the hallway, the scent of brewed coffee drifting from the common room, the faint jazz music that Mr. Brown played during his morning stretch routine. I had built a rhythm, simple, peaceful, and mine. Every Monday, I joined the knitting circle. On Wednesdays, I volunteered in the community garden, planting marigolds and tomatoes. Thursdays, I danced. Sundays, I sat in the chapel under the sunlight streaming through the stained glass window, thanking God for one thing: peace. Sometimes I still thought of Rachel. Not with anger, not even with sadness anymore. Just a soft, distant ache, like an old scar that no longer hurts when it rains. I'd see mothers and daughters shopping together downtown, laughing, arms linked. I'd smile at them, not with envy, but with understanding. They were living the dream I once had and lost. But life had given me something else: freedom. 1. The news one chilly morning in February, I was sipping my tea on the balcony when Monica knocked on my door. Mrs. Parker, she said, holding a brown envelope, a courier just delivered this for you. It's from a law office. I recognized the embossed name before she even handed it over. Mr. Andrew Cole, my attorney. Thank you, I said calmly, though my heart had begun to beat faster. After she left, I stared at the envelope for a long moment before sliding my finger under the flap. Inside was a single sheet of paper on Cole & Associates letterhead. Dear Mrs. Parker, as per the instructions of your estate file, I am forwarding a letter that has been recently submitted by your daughter, Mrs. Rachel Carter. She requested that it be delivered directly to you with no intermediary commentary. Warm regards, Andrew Cole, attorney at law. Attached to the note was a second envelope, cream-colored, sealed in blue wax, my name written in Rachel's familiar handwriting. For a long time, I couldn't open it. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from the flood of memories that handwriting carried. Birthday cards, school essays, notes that used to say, "Love you, Mama." I finally broke the seal and unfolded the letter. Holy sorry. 2. The letter. Dear Mama, I don't know how to begin this. I know I don't deserve a response, and maybe you won't even want to read this, but I need to say it anyway. I'm sorry, truly sorry. For leaving you out, for hurting you, for pretending I was protecting you when I was really protecting myself from embarrassment. I was wrong. Daniel's parents wanted a small ceremony. They said it would be more elegant to keep it private. I told myself you'd understand, that I was sparing you the stress. But the truth is, Mama, I was ashamed. Ashamed of the way you spoke your mind. Ashamed that your hands were rough from cleaning, that you wore your heart too openly, that you loved too loudly in a world that values silence and polish. I thought I was moving up in life. But I was only moving away from everything real. Since you moved, I've realized how empty my new world feels. There are fancy dinners, social events, beautiful clothes, but no warmth. No smell of sweet tea, no laughter echoing from the kitchen. No one who loves me for who I am, not for what I look like. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know that I see now what I couldn't see then. You weren't the one who embarrassed me. I embarrassed myself by forgetting where I came from. If you ever decide to see me again, I'll be here. Waiting, but not expecting. Love always. Rachel. I read the letter 3 times. The words blurred, but not from tears. Because oddly, I didn't feel the relief I thought I would. It wasn't that I didn't appreciate her apology. I did. It's just that the wound had already closed. Her words arrived late, like rain after the fire's already burned out. They could soften the ashes, but they couldn't rebuild what had been consumed. I folded the letter neatly and placed it inside my wooden memory box, the same one that held Thomas's wedding ring, a photograph of my parents, and Rachel's baby footprints. Then I whispered, "Thank you, baby. You finally learned the lesson I prayed you'd never have to learn the hard way." 3. The reflection that evening. I sat with Mrs. White and Mr. Brown on the terrace, watching the sunset paint the garden gold. We talked about nothing in particular: recipes, old movies, plans for the spring fair. At one point, Mrs. White asked gently, "Did you ever hear from your daughter?" I smiled. "Yes," she wrote. "And how do you feel?" "Peaceful," I said. "Will you see her?" "Maybe one day, when our hearts speak the same language again." She nodded, understanding without needing more words. 4. The understanding. Later that night, I stood in front of the mirror in my bedroom. The woman staring back at me didn't look broken anymore. The wrinkles were still there, the roadmap of laughter, worry, and years. But her eyes, they had light again. I realized that forgiveness wasn't about opening the door for others to walk back in. It was about walking out of the cage they built in your heart and locking it behind you, gently. I no longer needed Rachel to fix what had happened, because the lesson had already been written in my own story. A mother's love never ends. It just learns to love herself when no one else remembers how. The closure. Weeks later, at the community dining hall, Mr. Brown turned on the record player for our weekly dance night. The song was slow, soulful, the kind that carried both joy and melancholy in equal measure. He extended his hand toward me. "Care to dance, Mrs. Parker?" I laughed. "Always." As we swayed across the polished floor, I thought of Thomas, of little Rachel in her Sunday dress, of every version of myself that had loved and lost and learned. And I realized that even though life had taken so much, it had also given me something precious: the courage to start again. The song ended, but I kept smiling. Outside, the magnolias were blooming early that year. I took it as a sign that life, even after its harshest winters, always finds a way to blossom again. 6. Epilogue. 6 months later. Spring arrived in Atlanta with the sound of rain tapping against my balcony railing. I sat with a cup of chamomile tea, writing the last entry in my notebook, the one that had started with "Plan for Independence." Today marks 1 year since I discovered Rachel's wedding photo. 1 year since my heart broke and began to heal in ways I never thought possible. I don't regret any of it, because losing what I loved most led me back to myself. I closed the notebook and smiled. Somewhere deep down, I hoped Rachel was smiling too, not because we were reconciled, but because we were both finally learning what love truly meant. It wasn't about holding on. It was about letting go, with grace. I walked out onto my balcony. The air was cool, carrying the scent of wet earth and magnolia blossoms. Somewhere below, Mr. Brown's record played softly. "A change is gonna come." I looked toward the sky and whispered, "It already has." A year has passed since the day my phone fell to the floor and my world fell apart with it. The picture that once shattered me now lives quietly inside a photo box, no longer a wound, just a memory. There are mornings when I still wake up and, for half a second, expect to hear Rachel's voice calling, "Mama, are you up yet?" But then I open my eyes, and the sound I hear instead is the gentle rustle of magnolia leaves in the breeze. That sound, that quiet, is peace. I never thought peace could feel this soft, this steady. It's not loud, not triumphant. It doesn't come with applause or recognition. It comes when you finally stop chasing what hurts and start walking toward what heals. 1. Motherhood. For most of my life, I believed being a good mother meant giving everything: time, sleep, money, dreams. I believed love meant sacrifice, that pain was proof of devotion. But I was wrong. Love that destroys your spirit isn't love. It's dependency dressed as loyalty. I used to think I had to be in every chapter of my daughter's life. Now I understand that sometimes the story continues, and your role changes. You become a memory that guides instead of a presence that interferes. And that's okay. Because motherhood isn't about possession. It's about planting roots strong enough for your children to stand, even when they forget who watered the soil. 2. On respect. When Rachel left me out of her wedding, it wasn't just an oversight. It was a mirror. It reflected back every time I had taught her that my needs came second. Every time I had swallowed my pride to keep the peace. Every time I said it's okay when it wasn't. That mirror hurt to look into. But it also forced me to grow. Respect, I've learned, isn't given, it's taught by example. And if you keep letting people treat you small, they will never learn how big your heart truly is. The moment I stopped begging to be included, I started being respected, even by myself. 3. On forgiveness. People often ask if I forgave Rachel. The answer is yes, but not the way they think. Forgiveness isn't about letting someone back in. It's about letting yourself move on. I forgave her the day I realized that her choices came from ignorance, not cruelty. She didn't know any better. She was raised to believe that success meant distance from where she came from. She forgot that I was the one who built that starting line for her to run from. So yes, I forgave her, not because she earned it, but because I deserved peace. 4. On loneliness and freedom. I used to fear being alone more than anything. I thought solitude was punishment, but now, solitude feels like sunlight, gentle, healing, warm. At Magnolia Grove, I found people who see me, not for what I can do for them, but for who I am. We share stories, laughter, recipes, dances, and we fill each other's lives with small, honest joys. I no longer wait for my phone to ring. I no longer check Facebook for glimpses of a life I'm not part of. I live mine, fully, quietly, gratefully. Some nights when the sky turns orange over Decatur, I imagine Rachel somewhere out there, looking at the same sunset. Maybe she feels guilt. Maybe she feels love. Either way, I send her peace, because the world doesn't need more bitterness. It needs more mothers who love their children enough to let go. 5. On starting over. If there's one thing I want people to understand, especially women my age, it's that starting over isn't failure. It's courage. Society tells us we're too old, too tired, too late. But that's a lie. Every morning you wake up with breath in your lungs and a choice in your heart. It's not too late. You can still learn, you can still dance, you can still love yourself fiercely. The world doesn't end when someone stops choosing you. Sometimes that's exactly when it begins. On peace. Peace, I've discovered, isn't loud. It doesn't demand attention. It's sitting on your balcony with a cup of tea, watching the magnolias bloom, and realizing you don't need anyone's permission to be happy. It's finding beauty in quiet moments. In morning light, in laughter shared with friends, in your own reflection smiling back at you without regret. It's knowing that even if no one ever says thank you for everything you've done, the universe saw it all. And it rewards you not with applause, but with serenity. 7. The last entry today, I opened my notebook, the same one that began with Plan for Independence, and I wrote the final line. Peace achieved. Evelyn Grace Parker. Independent, alive, whole. I closed it and placed it in the wooden box with Rachel's letter, Thomas's ring, and the old photograph of us as a family. Not as a symbol of pain, but as proof of endurance. Then I stepped out onto the balcony. The air smelled of magnolia and rain. Somewhere below, Mr. Brown played an old record. Sam Cooke's A Change Is Gonna Come. I smiled, whispering to myself, it already did. And in that moment, I understood that the greatest love story of my life wasn't between a mother and a daughter. It was between a woman and her own rediscovered soul. If you're watching this and you've ever given your whole heart to someone who forgot your worth, take a deep breath. You're not invisible. You're not too late. You're just beginning. Life has a way of taking from us the people we thought we couldn't live without, only to return us to the person we were always meant to become. Don't wait for anyone to validate your pain. Don't beg to be seen in stories you outgrew. Stand up, pour yourself a cup of peace, and whisper the same words I did that morning. It already changed, and I'm finally free. My name is Evelyn Grace Parker, and this is the story of how I stopped waiting to be loved and started loving myself.